Welcome to Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a really critical examination of American universities.
Yeah.
You know, those powerful engines of knowledge and innovation. We're going to try and pull back the curtain on three major forces shaping them right now. The incredible historical legacy of student activism, the profound financial strains they're under, and also the rising tide of political interference that's challenging academic freedom.
It's definitely a complex picture.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it directly impacts everything, doesn't it? From like life-saving research to the future opportunities available to you, our listeners.
Absolutely. And our goal in this deep dive really is to connect these threads for you, to reveal not just what is happening, but why it matters so deeply for the health of our higher education system, the autonomy of these institutions, and, well, even the very fabric of a democratic society that relies on critical thinking and open inquiry.
Yeah.
We'll aim to keep this conversation clear, professional, and accessible to everyone, whether you're a student, a policymaker, or just someone who believes in the power of learning.
Okay, so let's unpack this by looking back first, because campus activism isn't exactly a new phenomenon.
Not at all.
It has this rich and, frankly, surprisingly impactful history. It really proves that students have always been a powerful force for change. Think about this. Can you even imagine nearly 500,000 college students across the nation just collectively refusing to attend classes?
It's hard to picture today.
It is. But that happened April 22, 1936. They were protesting the rise of fascism in Europe and advocating against the U.S. entering foreign wars, holding signs, war is legalized murder.
Wow.
It wasn't just a protest, it was the first mass student movement in American history. So what's the kind of core takeaway from these early displays?
Well, what's truly fascinating here is how consistent the role of universities has been, like a crucible for these movements. As NYU history professor Robert Cohen aptly puts it, one of the roles of universities is to ask questions, uncomfortable questions.
That hits the nail on the head.
And these early student movements did precisely that. They weren't just reacting, they were actively shaping public discourse, forcing society to confront difficult issues, often long before the mainstream was ready. It really illustrates the unique position universities hold.
And it really gets interesting when we see how this pattern continued, how it influenced these pivotal moments in our history.
Yeah.
You fast forward to February 1960, the Civil Rights Movement.
A key moment.
Absolutely. The Greensboro four black college students making this incredibly bold statement, just sitting down at an all-white lunch counter.
Such courage.
Exactly. This simple act sparked sit-ins across the South, a real act of putting your body on the line. And, it worked.
It did.
By July 1960, that Greensboro Woolworth counter was desegregated. Historian Reese Iserman called it a singular victory, and it directly led to the founding of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Which became the spearhead of youth activism in the South, as he put it. And zooming out a bit, these student efforts, including the courageous freedom rides, weren't just isolated incidents. They genuinely helped galvanize crucial support for major legislative changes, like the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Right.
And then just a few years later, in 1964, UC Berkeley. Students themselves rallied against restrictions on their own activism, demanding full constitutional rights right there on campus.
Free speech movement.
Exactly. That was pivotal. It fundamentally expanded students' free speech rights just as the anti-Vietnam War movement was really starting to gather steam. It profoundly shaped that whole generation.
And those anti-Vietnam War protests, they reached a peak, didn't they, in 1970, after the U.S. expanded into Cambodia.
A real flashpoint.
Yeah, we saw students at nearly 900 schools coordinating strikes, boycotting classes, even occupying buildings. Despite significant backlash and, tragically, incidents like the Kent State shootings.
A terrible moment.
These large-scale demonstrations were just undeniable. They clearly pressured President Nixon's administration to accelerate the U.S. withdrawal, which happened by 1973.
And domestically, too.
Right, domestically, the energy from these protests directly contributed to ratifying the 26th Amendment in 1971, lowering the voting age to 18.
Huge impact. And we can't forget the anti-apartheid protests of the 80s either.
No, definitely not.
Students demanded universities divest from companies doing business in South Africa. They built those shantytowns on campus to raise awareness.
Very visual, very powerful.
Extremely. These demonstrations really brought attention to how American investments were, inadvertently supporting a repressive regime. And ultimately, they succeeded. They convinced many colleges to sell billions of dollars worth of stock.
Billions, wow.
As Esserman says, these student demonstrations are largely honorable and has accomplished significant social reforms from which we've all benefited. So what's the enduring lesson here, you think, about universities as centers of change?
Well, what seems clear across all these decades is that Professor Cohen's point really rings true. Student protests are fundamentally about civic engagement. They remind us that students, often not even old enough to vote yet, have consistently held this enormous power to impact the course of the country. These institutions just provide a unique space for that kind of vital, sometimes uncomfortable civic expression.
A necessary space.
Exactly. Okay, so having looked back at that incredible power of student movements, let's pivot now to the very real and immediate financial pressures threatening the institutions themselves.
Right, the present-day challenges.
Yeah. Today, American universities are facing these profound financial challenges. Recent reports detail significant budget cuts across major research institutions. This isn't just about balancing the books. It feels like it's about the core mission.
Absolutely. And the issues are, well, multifaceted. They're creating what you could call a perfect financial storm.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
We're seeing freezes or even eliminations of federal funding, rising inflationary pressures hitting operational costs hard, and for some of the wealthier private institutions, even a possible increase in taxes on their endowment income.
So squeeze from all sides.
Pretty much, yeah. Multiple directions.
And these aren't minor adjustments we're talking about. We're seeing massive shortfalls that are forcing really, really tough decisions, like Temple University, for example. They're projecting a $60 million deficit for the upcoming fiscal year.
$60 million?
Yeah, largely due to a drop of nearly 10,000 students since 2017. And this translates into a 5% reduction in compensation costs, so position eliminations, salary freezes for administrators.
And it's definitely not an isolated case. We're seeing major institutions all across the country dealing with this. From large public universities like the University of Minnesota, they're trying to cover a $115 million revenue reduction with 7% program cuts, maybe tuition hikes. To private powerhouses like Cornell, they're facing profound financial challenges because they lost hundreds of millions in federal research contracts. They've announced financial austerity in all areas. Restrictions on new hiring, workforce reductions.
It really highlights how widespread this is. Public, private, it doesn't seem to matter.
No, it's hitting everywhere.
And a big part of this pressure, you mentioned federal funding. It comes from policy changes, right? There's this new law, H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, passed in July.
Right.
And while it lets the government borrow more, it also means spending cuts elsewhere. So for universities, that means less money for federal research grants, and for those wealthy private schools, a higher tax on their endowments.
So it's directly shrinking the pot of money available for vital programs. It's a direct hit.
Exactly.
And what's particularly striking is just the sheer scale of this impact on federal funding. Harvard, for instance, lost nearly $3 billion in federal funding just between April and May.
$3 billion.
Yes. Involving over 950 federal award terminations, affecting hundreds of subawards across like 32 states. Columbia University also saw a loss, $400 million in federal funding. That resulted in termination notices for 180 researchers.
Wow. These aren't small tweaks then. These are foundational shifts.
Definitely not small tweaks.
So what does this actually mean for the cutting-edge work happening in these places, the kind of work that really benefits society?
It means life-saving research is directly at risk. That's the bottom line.
Jeez.
Harvard itself identified critical work on things like tuberculosis, chemotherapy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, even the Nipah virus.
Things we all care about.
Absolutely. Imagine Dr. Sarah Fortune's $60 million TB research project. It nearly saw its macaque monkeys euthanized because of a stop work order, only saved by a $500,000 donation at the last minute.
That's unbelievable, cutting it that close.
And Professor Donald Ingber at Harvard, he lost nearly $20 million in contracts for radiation exposure research. That put the salaries of almost 20 students, fellows, and staff at risk.
So it hits people directly, their livelihood.
Immediately. And it's not just the sciences, even humanities research, like a $1.5 million grant for early elementary education studies has been impacted. Beyond the immediate cuts, the real insight here is how these financial pressures really erode that foundational long-term research.
The kind that takes years.
Exactly. The kind that takes decades to yield breakthroughs and is, frankly, least likely to attract short-term private funding.
Right. And it's not just the bottom line we need to worry about. These financial strains are happening alongside this other worrying trend you mentioned, political interference,
Yeah.
challenging the very essence of academic freedom.
Exactly. We're talking about institutional autonomy here.
Define that for us quickly.
Sure. It's basically the idea that universities should be able to decide among themselves the work it is important for them to undertake without having to answer to, political correctness, economic utility, or religious orthodoxy.
Okay, freedom to inquire.
Precisely. And this isn't just an American issue, by the way. We see it globally. Look at Hungary, for example, where 75% of public higher ed institutions have been transformed into these private trusts.
Trusts?
Yeah, with boards mostly made up of external members, including active politicians, who now control university budgets and rules. It's a really concerning trend for independent thought anywhere.
And here in the U.S., the situation is equally concerning, maybe sometimes less overt, but just as impactful. You look at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
A key example.
Yeah, we've seen legislative and political interference specifically aimed at suppressing academic inquiry into governmental practices. Back in 2015, the Center on Poverty, Work, and Opportunity was just closed. Why? Because its reports were critical of the State General Assembly's poverty policies.
And the director even faced personal threats, right?
Yeah. And later, the law school's budget was permanently cut by $500,000 because it continued publishing on North Carolina poverty policy.
So a critical point emerges there. What message does that send to other researchers and departments?
A chilling one.
Exactly. And in the same year, UNC's Center for Civil Rights was explicitly banned from engaging in litigation. Critics on the board actually said they would have felt differently if the center focused on, say, Second Amendment cases.
Wow, so specific.
Right. And contrast that sharply with an unrequested $5 million appropriation that created the North Carolina Policy Collaboratory, which was expected to produce environmental research more congenial to legislative goals and operated outside traditional academic control.
So, clearly prioritizing politically aligned research.
It seems that way, a clear pattern.
But it's not just Chapel Hill, is it?
No, not at all. In Maryland, there was an attempt to condition a $750,000 appropriation to the University of Maryland on getting a report detailing a law clinic's cases and client names. Why? Because the CEO of a major company was annoyed by the clinic's actions.
Just annoyed.
Apparently. Louisiana State University was censured for violating academic freedom after a researcher commented on shoddy work by the Army Corps of Engineers, driven by fear of jeopardizing federal grants.
So fear is a factor.
Big time. Even private institutions like Tulane have faced threats to their tax status because of the work of their environmental law clinic. These aren't isolated incidents. They really show a pattern of external pressure trying to steer academic inquiry.
And private influence, too, not just government.
We see that, too, yes. Conservative donors at George Mason University, for instance, have reportedly been afforded remarkable influence over faculty selection and curriculum. And in Arizona, freedom schools have been lavishly funded by direct state appropriations specifically to teach conservative political principles, while general university budgets got only modest increases. This really speaks to a clear desire to alter the way their public universities teach and carry out research.
Moving away from open inquiry towards specific ideologies.
That seems to be the goal in those cases.
So what does this all mean for you listening? As a student or researcher, or just someone interested in the free exchange of ideas?
Well, these interventions create what's known as a chilling effect.
Self-censorship, basically.
Essentially, yes. Faculty and researchers start avoiding controversial topics out of fear of reprisal or losing funding. An ACNU AAUP study actually found that 35% of faculty believe there is less academic freedom in teaching now, and 19% feel it in research.
That's a lot.
It is. And many now admit they avoid controversial topics when revising curricula or expressing views in their courses. This directly impacts the very viewpoint diversity that universities are supposed to foster.
Undermines the whole point, really.
Indeed. The president of Harvard's response to some government demands really sums up the danger. No government, regardless of which party is in power, should dictate what private universities can teach, whom they can admit and hire, and which areas of study and inquiry they can pursue.
Strong words.
Because when external forces try to impose orthodoxy, it doesn't just threaten the integrity of strong universities, it directly undermines constitutional democracies that thrive on open debate and independent thought.
Okay, this brings us to another really crucial part of the academic community, international students.
Yes, a very important group.
Especially for those from India who form one of the largest international student groups in the U.S., this turbulence cuts across three critical areas: funding for their studies, immigration hurdles, and their future job stability here in the U.S.
This is a serious concern, and it has significant implications, you're right. Visa scrutiny, for one, has intensified dramatically.
How so?
Over 6,000 student visas, F1 visas, the standard ones, have been revoked just this year. Some are linked to alleged criminal violations, but others seem connected to support for terrorism, often interpreted through the lens of pro-Palestinian activism.
Wow. So activism is being scrutinized.
It appears so. Immigration officials are now vetting social media for content deemed anti-American or anti-Semitic, which makes basically every online post a potential risk for these students.
That must be incredibly stressful.
Unimaginably. And the process itself is becoming a huge hurdle. Consulates have paused scheduling new appointments for F1 visas, leaving many hopefuls just stranded in their home countries.
Stuck in limbo.
Exactly. And when interviews are granted, applicants face unprecedented scrutiny. They're often required to make their social media profiles public. Yeah, and the impact is clear in the numbers. There was a steep 27% drop in F1 visas issued to Indian students just from March to May this year compared to last year.
27%, that's huge.
It is. Plus, the cost is rising sharply. New fees, like a $250 visa integrity fee, are being added.
So more hurdles, more costs.
And if we connect this back to the broader picture of university funding cuts we discussed earlier.
Right, the assistantships.
Precisely. Many international graduate students rely heavily on research or teaching assistantships. Those are frequently funded by the very federal grants that are now being cut.
So if those funds dry up,
their tuition waivers and stipends can just vanish overnight. That puts them in danger of falling out of status on their F1 visa, which has serious consequences. This really brings us to consider, how does this truly impact their future and ultimately ours?
That's a crucial point. Because for their long-term prospects, their ability to get an H-1B visa, the skilled worker visa after graduation, is also at risk now. Well, if research labs and academic departments are scaling back because of these budget cuts, international students will just have fewer opportunities to publish papers, gain that vital U.S. work experience, or secure those high-profile internships.
All things that significantly strengthen an H-1B application.
Exactly. It's a kind of cascading effect that really limits their pathways forward here.
And this leads us to a broader, maybe more profound implication for national innovation.
Right, the bigger picture.
Yeah. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce identifies key threats to innovation in America. Things like a lack of experimentation and incentives for original ideas in education and research, losing talented professionals to other countries, and these onerous immigration hurdles.
Universities are central to that ecosystem.
Absolutely fundamental. They step in where corporations often don't, especially to conduct basic science research. The costs of losing this sort of front end of the innovation pipeline are immense, even if we won't fully realize them for years. It's really an erosion of future potential.
Yeah, you're chipping away at the foundation. Ultimately, the autonomy of universities, their freedom to pursue research just for research's sake, to challenge the status quo, and to foster an environment of diverse thought, that's precisely what attracts top talent globally, isn't it?
It's a huge draw.
So if we diminish that freedom, if we make it harder for these bright, creative minds to come here and thrive, we risk losing those individuals. They might otherwise contribute to groundbreaking discoveries right here, but maybe they'll look for positions abroad instead.
A brain drain, essentially.
Yeah. It's not just about one university's budget. It really feels like it's about our collective future.
Well said.
Okay, so we've taken a pretty deep dive into the complex state of American universities today. We've explored how student activism has historically been this potent force for change, but also how current financial pressures and growing political interference are creating really significant hurdles. And we've discussed the profound impact these challenges have on international students and, by extension, the nation's capacity for innovation.
Yeah. In brief, the challenges faced by universities today, from the budget shortfalls to direct intervention in academic affairs, they really do have far-reaching consequences.
They touch everything.
They affect the very research that saves lives, the opportunities available to students, and ultimately the ability of our society to foster critical thinking, drive innovation, and frankly, evolve through open inquiry and diverse perspectives. It's a foundational pillar that truly needs our attention and protection.
So as universities navigate these really complex waters, what responsibilities do we as a society have in protecting their capacity to educate, innovate, and yes, challenge the status quo? It's definitely a question worth mulling over.
It certainly is.
All the best.
Yeah.
And we will meet again with another important matter again.